He is not here. He is risen. Matthew 28. 6 people of God, listen. The resurrection is not a holiday. It is not a tradition. It is not an event to be remembered. It is a reality to be entered. It is not the end of the story. It is the explosion in the middle of it. For 2,000 years, we have tried to tame it, made it a pastel morning with lilies and soft hymns, but the resurrection was not soft. It was not gentle. It was an earthquake, a tearing of the veil. A rupture in the universe. It was radical. Radical because it broke every law, the laws of decay, the laws of despair, the law of sin, and the finality of death. Death was the one thing every empire agreed on. Pharaoh, Caesar, the kings of Babylon all bowed to it. But this man, this Yeshua, this Jesus, did not. He went into the tomb not as a victim, but as a warrior. He didn't lose his life. He gave it. And then he took it back. The stone wasn't rolled away so he could get out. No, it was rolled away so we could see in, to witness the impossible, to see the silence of death shattered by the word that cannot die. He reversed everything. The tomb became a womb. The grave became a gate. The cross became a crown. The one who hung in naked shame now reigns in radiant glory. The one crushed by Rome now rules over the nations. The one rejected by man is now exalted by God. This is no theology. This is revolution, a radical upending of what you think is real. If he is risen, then nothing is secure. Not your sin, not your fear, not your comfort. If he is risen, then you must rise. The resurrection is not about an event in history. It is about you living in victory. It means that your failure is not final, that your addiction is not absolute, that your sorrow is not sovereign, because if the tomb is empty, then the throne is occupied, and if the throne is occupied, then you are called not to survival, but to resurrection life. You see, he did not come to make bad people good, he came to make dead people live. Radical, yes, because grace is radical, mercy is radical, forgiveness is radical, and love that bleeds and rises again is not safe, it is holy fire. So now you stand in the aftermath of the impossible. You are the aftershock of resurrection. You carry the tremors of that empty tomb in your soul. Live like it, walk like it, preach like it, love like it, die like it, for he is not dead, he is risen, and because he lives, so shall you. Death was final, immutable, the last chapter of every story, the iron gate no man could pass through and return. It reigned as the most dependable law in creation. The wisest kings, the strongest warriors, the holiest prophets, none could escape its decree. Dust you are, and to dust you shall return. That was the covenant written into the flesh of every living thing. Every heartbeat was a countdown, every breath a fading echo. The cycle was fixed. Death had the final word. It always did, but then, on the third day, something happened that had never happened before. A man beaten beyond recognition, crucified by the world's greatest empire, wrapped in burial linen, sealed in stone, watched by Rome's finest guard, stood up. Not resuscitated. Not revived, resurrected. He didn't return to life as it was. He stepped into life as it had never been, incorruptible, glorious, immortal. The grave, for the first time in history, had lost its grip. This wasn't just a miracle. It was a rupture in the universe, a breach in the laws that govern time, matter, and mortality. The resurrection wasn't natural. It wasn't supposed to happen. It shattered the laws of biology, the expectations of logic, and the inevitability of decay. The world had never seen anything like it. Death had always played its game with certainty, but when it tried to swallow the Son of God, it bit off more than it could contain. The tomb wasn't enough. The stone couldn't hold him, the guards couldn't stop him, the laws of nature were too weak to bind the one who authored them. The resurrection was not God adjusting the laws of creation. It was the Creator walking back into the frame, rewriting what had been written in ashes and returning life to what had been lost in the garden. The same word that said, "Let there be light," now declared, "I am the resurrection and the life." And the same power that formed the stars now pulsed through veins once cold and lifeless. It was creation all over again, but greater, a genesis not of dust alone, but of glory. If death was once the great equalizer, the resurrection became the great disruptor. It declared that death was no longer the end, no longer absolute, no longer sovereign. It revealed that what we once called natural was actually temporary, that the final word belonged not to the grave, but to the one who stepped out of it. This is the radical nature of resurrection. It doesn't improve the rules, it abolishes them. It says, what you thought was permanent is not. What you thought was hopeless can be redeemed. What you buried can live again. The resurrection rewrites everything. It doesn't offer repair. It offers reversal, restoration, asterisk, asterisk, resurrection. Asterisk, asterisk, they laid him in a tomb, cut from rock, sealed with stone, guarded by Rome. The world exhaled its final breath over him, believing the story was over. Heaven was silent, hell rejoiced, earth trembled. The grave had claimed yet another life, and this time it was the life of the one who claimed to be life itself. To the eyes of men, it ended in darkness, in death, in defeat. But what they didn't see was what that tomb would become, not a prison of flesh, but a portal of glory. The stone that sealed the grave was not there to keep him in death, could not contain him, and neither could stone. That stone was not a barrier to his power. It was a veil for a moment, a witness to the mystery, and when it was rolled away, it was not rolled for his sake. He did not need an opening to rise. The one who walked on water, who silenced storms, who commanded demons with a word, did not require an exit strategy. He had already walked through death itself. No stone could hinder him, no seal could bind him. No empire could contain him. The stone was rolled away not to let him out, but to let asterisk us asterisk in. It was opened so that we might look and see what eyes had never seen before, an empty place where death should have reigned. The linen folded, the body gone, the grave abandoned, the silence of death broken by the thunder of resurrection. We were invited in, not just to witness the absence, but to behold the victory. The grave had become a testimony. The darkness had become a doorway. The place of mourning became a place of awakening. The place that once marked the end of hope was now the womb of a new creation. From the place of sorrow came the shout of salvation. From death, glory, from finality, eternity, he emerged not only alive, but triumphant, not merely revived, but transfigured, his glory now unveiled, the sun risen with healing in his wings, the scars still there not as wounds, but as trophies. The grave did its worst and failed, glory won, and now the way is open. The tomb is not just empty, it is asterisk accessible. Asterisk, the stone's removal is a summons. Come and see, said the angel. Step into the place where death was conquered. Step into the evidence that the impossible has become real. The tomb is no longer a symbol of what is lost, but a sign of what is promised. Resurrection power is no longer hidden. It is revealed, and we are called not just to observe it, but to live in it. From the grave to glory, the path has been carved, not by angels, not by armies, but by the Lamb who laid himself down and took himself up again. The tomb has become the first step in the ascension, from earth to heaven. From ashes to beauty, from death to life, on a hill outside Jerusalem, they lifted him high between two criminals. Stripped, mocked, pierced, he hung exposed to the world's scorn. Blood poured from his brow, his hands, his side. The sky turned black at noon, the earth shook beneath the weight of divine judgment, and when he breathed his last, the crowd dispersed with the satisfaction of justice served. The priests believed blasphemy had been silenced. Rome believed rebellion had been crushed. Hell believed heaven had been overthrown. The cross stood tall, an instrument of shame, a symbol of defeat. The Messiah was dead. It was, by every appearance, the ultimate loss. The movement he started scattered in fear. The disciples hid, their hopes buried with him. What could be more tragic than the death of the one who claimed to be the Son of God? It was not merely the end of a man, it seemed the end of the mission. The end of the kingdom, the end of the dream, but the cross was not what it appeared to be. It was not the end, it was the door. What looked like defeat was in fact the strategy of victory. What seemed like surrender was the act of invasion. At the moment when the enemy believed he had triumphed, he was in fact being undone. The cross was not weakness. It was the outpouring of divine strength cloaked in suffering. It was not the triumph of darkness. It was the trap set for it. For on that rugged tree, Jesus bore not just the nails of Rome, but the full weight of sin, shame, and separation. He took into himself the curse spoken over mankind and drank the cup of wrath until it was empty. This is the cosmic reversal. The power of God revealed not in domination, but in humility. The throne of heaven revealed not in gold, but in wood and blood. The crown not of jewels, but of thorns. It was in dying that he destroyed death. In being cursed that he broke the curse. In being forsaken that he made the way for reconciliation. The cross, once a sign of Rome's cruelty, became the eternal emblem of God's mercy. It was a battlefield disguised as an execution. It was victory disguised as loss. It was the wisdom of God hidden from the wise, revealed only in resurrection light. For what began in horror was unveiled in glory on the third day, when the tomb stood empty and the crucified one stood risen. The reversal is total. The grave became the gate, the cross became the crown, the place of mocking became the place of worship. The one they pierced now reigns, the blood they shed now speaks. What they thought they had ended became the very beginning of redemption for the world. The ultimate instrument of death has become the eternal proclamation of life. The cross, once feared, is now lifted high, not as a symbol of defeat, but of unstoppable, irreversible, glorious victory. He didn't just rise, he inverted reality. What happened on the third day wasn't merely a return to life. It was the eruption of a new dimension into the old, a complete upheaval of how the world works. The boundaries that had always governed existence, life and death, darkness and light, loss and hope, were overturned in a single moment when the stone was rolled back and the tomb stood empty. A tomb is not supposed to give birth. It is supposed to consume. It is the final punctuation mark in every human story. It is where names are forgotten, where silence rules, where dreams decay. But in this one tomb, in this one moment in time, something utterly unnatural occurred. Life, pure, indestructible, glorious life, burst forth from the place that had always been reserved for death. That was not just resurrection, that was inversion. In that act, the very definition of what is possible was rewritten. Reality was flipped on its axis. The grave, once the end of every path, became the start of a new one. The cross, once the symbol of cursed execution, became the throne of the king. The lifeless body placed in the tomb was not merely revived. It emerged transfigured, radiant with a life that cannot die again, not resuscitated, but resurrected into an entirely new kind of existence. This was more than miracle. This was a rupture in the fabric of fallen creation. Sin had dictated one reality, but grace introduced another. Death had dictated one future, but resurrection shattered the illusion. The rules that had bound the world since the fall, entropy, decay, inevitability, separation from God, were undone in the garden where the grave could not hold him. It was not just a personal victory, it was a cosmic detonation. In rising, he inverted everything. The last became first. The rejected became the cornerstone. The humiliated became exalted. He who was despised became the desire of nations. The crucified became the crowned. He broke the world open and remade it, not with weapons, but with wounds, not with armies, but with sacrifice. Everything this world had taught us about strength, about power, about finality, was exposed as false. The natural order was not the highest law. There was a deeper law, a greater kingdom, a truer story, and it was revealed not in cathedrals or palaces, but in the echo of angels inside an empty tomb. He didn't just rise to life. He brought life with him, and not the fragile life we cling to, but the eternal, indestructible life that outshines death and outlasts every grave. When he rose, he didn't restore what was lost. He unveiled what was hidden, the reality behind reality. The resurrection was not the return to how things were. It was the unveiling of how things truly are in the heart of God. Life no longer ends in death. In him, death ends in life. The resurrection was not a quiet event. It was not a gentle symbol. It was the climax of a war that stretched across ages, from Eden's exile to Golgotha's hill, a war not waged with iron swords or earthly soldiers, but with blood and spirit. It was not man fighting God, nor God fighting man, but God in the flesh descending into the heart of darkness to destroy the powers that held humanity captive, and the battlefield was not just the earth, it was the grave itself. From the moment sin entered the world, a war began. The enemy took what God had made good and twisted it. He planted thorns in the soil, sickness in the flesh, death in the blood. Creation groaned under the weight of the curse. The law stood as both shield and sentence, and humanity, though made in God's image, walked as slaves beneath a cruel master, sin ruling the heart, death sealing the fate. The armies of heaven did not descend. No thunderous host marched upon Rome or Babylon. Instead, a different weapon was chosen, a lamb. This was the divine paradox. Victory would come not through domination, but through surrender. The Son of God came not with legions, but with wounds. Not with a sword, but with a cross. He allowed himself to be taken, tried, mocked, and murdered. The war plan of heaven was not to escape suffering, but to enter it fully. On the cross, he absorbed the very poison that infected the world. He took the sin, the wrath, the curse. The blood he shed was not just the blood of man. It was the blood of war, a holy invasion into enemy territory. And when he died, it appeared that darkness had won. The commander had fallen, the Messiah was entombed, but that was only the silence before the explosion, for in the unseen realm hell had overstepped. The enemy had taken the sinless one, and in doing so, broke the boundaries of justice. And in that violation the trap was sprung. Christ descended not in defeat but in conquest. He walked into death's dominion not as a victim, but as a king reclaiming his territory. Then came the resurrection, the moment of divine detonation. The grave was shattered from within. The stronghold of death was overthrown. The keys of Hades were taken back. The stone rolled away not just from a tomb, but from the hearts of men. The resurrection declared once, and for all that death had been disarmed. Sin had lost its grip. Satan had been stripped of his false throne. God had waged war, but not as the world wages war. He did not conquer by killing his enemies. He conquered by dying for them. He did not overcome by force, but by sacrifice. By the Spirit that raised Christ from the dead, he won the ultimate battle, not just over death itself, but over everything that separates man from God. The resurrection is the flag planted in enemy ground. It is not the end of the war. It is the victory cry that changed the world forever. In the beginning, God spoke, and the universe was born. Light pierced darkness. Form came to the formless. Life burst forth from the breath of God. Creation was flawless, vibrant, alive. But then came the fracture. Sin entered, and with it death. The beauty of Eden was lost, and every generation since has lived in the shadow of that loss. The first Genesis gave us breath, but the fall chained that breath to a clock, a countdown toward decay. The garden closed, the gates sealed, the ground cursed. Humanity wandered east of Eden, longing for home and hope. Then, in the fullness of time, another dawn broke. This time, not in Eden, but in a garden outside a tomb. The stone rolled away. The body that had borne the curse stood upright, breathing again, but not as before. This was not a return to the old. This was not Eden restored. It was Eden surpassed. The resurrection of Jesus was not simply the undoing of death. It was the remaking of everything. A new beginning, a new Genesis. On that morning, the same God who once breathed into dust now breathed again. This time through resurrected lungs, filled not just with oxygen, but with incorruptible life. The tomb, once a symbol of finality, became a womb, birthing the firstborn of the new creation. Christ rose not as a resuscitated corpse, but as the prototype of a new humanity, unstained by sin, untouched by decay, unconquered by death. He is not merely alive. He is the first of a kind, the start of a redeemed creation. This is the cosmic scope of the resurrection. It didn't just affect one man, it unleashed a new order. The laws of mortality, of entropy, of futility, cracked, shattered, rewritten. The resurrection is not only about what we are saved from, but what we are saved asterisk into. Asterisk, it is not just liberation, it is recreation. The same Spirit that hovered over the waters in Genesis now raised Christ from the dead, declaring that the work of recreation had begun. The garden tomb was no accident, it was prophetic. Just as life once began in a garden, so life began again in a garden. The gardener himself rose from the soil, and with him came the seeds of resurrection planted into the world. Every healed heart, every forgiven sin, every act of grace and transformation is a ripple of that new beginning, a sign that the old order is passing and a new world is being born. The resurrection marked day one of something entirely new. Not an improved version of the past, but a future breaking into the present. The curse is not just lifted, it is being reversed. The dust of Adam gives way to the glory of Christ. And just as creation once began with the words, "Let there be," so now it begins again with a voice calling forth from the tomb, "Come forth." The resurrection isn't the end of the story, it's the start of a greater one. The tomb was supposed to be the final humiliation. A borrowed grave, hastily arranged before the Sabbath, cut from stone yet filled with silence and sorrow. The one who had walked on water now lay wrapped in linen, still and cold. The one who had raised the dead had become the dead. The king had no crown, no palace, no followers left in the open. Rome's seal marked the stone, the empire's unspoken decree that rebellion had been crushed, and that this supposed Messiah was nothing more than another failed prophet. The tomb was the full stop at the end of the sentence, final, sealed, and forgotten. But God does not write stories the way men do. What the world saw as defeat, heaven had orchestrated as coronation. For in the hidden chambers of that grave, something unseen by human eyes was taking place. The corpse of Christ was not decaying, it was transforming. The one who had emptied himself of glory was now receiving it back in fullness. The descent into death was not the end, but the pathway to exaltation. The tomb, meant as a place of shame, was about to be revealed as a throne of triumph. When the stone was rolled away, the vacancy of the tomb was not just proof of life, it was proof of victory. The one who had been mocked as King of the Jews now stood as King of all kings. He emerged not in weakness, but in glory, no longer a suffering servant, but a reigning sovereign. The thorns that pierced his brow had been the first crown. Now, invisible yet undeniable, he wore a crown that could never be removed. The empty tomb was his royal chamber, the moment when the heavens declared what men had missed. This is the King of glory. The resurrection did not erase the cross it crowned it. The path of humiliation became the stairway to exaltation. Every wound, every drop of blood, every insult hurled at him became part of the coronation procession. For in the kingdom of God, the low is lifted high and the broken is made whole. His suffering was not weakness, it was the price of enthronement. His silence before his accusers was not defeat, it was the silence of a lion about to roar. From that moment on, the empty tomb stood not as a monument to loss, but as the epicenter of a kingdom that will never end. The grave had been a throne room in disguise. The linen graveclothes, folded and left behind, were not remnants of failure, but signs of a mission completed. The throne of Christ was not forged in gold, but in obedience, not lifted by men, but raised by God. The one who stooped lower than any man has now been exalted higher than every name. He was crowned not after avoiding death, but by conquering it. And the empty tomb speaks with royal authority. The King has risen, not in spite of humiliation, but through it. What man saw as disgrace, heaven has declared divine majesty. The tomb is empty, and the throne is eternal. Love has always been the heartbeat of God's story, yet never had the world seen a love like this. Not a love of sentiment or softness, but a love forged in agony, tested by betrayal, and proven in blood. A love so radical it walked willingly into death. A love that could have called down legions of angels, yet chose to be bound, beaten, and buried. This is not the love of poets or philosophers. This is the love of the cross. A love that did not turn back when the nails were driven. A love that stretched out its arms wide enough to embrace the sin of the world. Radical love is not safe. It is not reasonable. It is not passive. It bleeds. The love of God in Christ went all the way, the Garden of Gethsemane to the whipping post, to the hill of execution, and then into the very pit of the grave. He did not flinch. He did not retreat. This love did not stop at suffering. It embraced it. It bore the full weight of rejection, injustice, and wrath, not for the worthy, but for the unworthy, not for the righteous, but for sinners. This love did not just go far, it went all the way to death. And not just any death, but death on a cross. Yet the radical nature of his love was not exhausted in the dying. It was unleashed in the rising. This is love with power, not just the power to endure death, but the power to overcome it. The grave could not keep what love had claimed. The stone could not seal what love had purchased. The radical love that bled is the same love that broke the tomb. And when Christ rose, he did not return empty-handed. He returned with the keys of death and hell. He returned with a love that now cannot be stopped, cannot be silenced, and cannot be reversed. Radical love became radical power. The one who laid down his life took it up again, not as a victim, but as a victor. And this power is not brute force. It is not the domination of tyrants. It is the invincible force of mercy, the unstoppable flood of grace. The world had never seen power like this, power that raises the dead, restores the lost, redeems the guilty. A power rooted not in fear, but in sacrifice. This is the nature of resurrection love. It is not content to remain in the grave. It rises, it seeks, it saves, and it does not stop. The love that went to the lowest place is now exalted to the highest, and it is calling out still. This love cannot be defeated because it has already faced the worst the world can offer and emerged triumphant. It is not fragile. It is not fleeting. It is the blazing center of God's heart, burning through the darkness, breaking chains, opening graves. The resurrection of Jesus was not just a miracle. It was a detonation, a shaking of foundations, a toppling of thrones, a declaration of war against every false power that claimed authority over the world. It was heaven's answer to every lie, every empire, every principality that had set itself up in rebellion against the true King. When Christ rose from the grave, it was not in a quiet corner. It was a shockwave sent through the realms of men and spirits alike. The resurrection is not just personal. It is political, cosmic, eternal. At the time of Jesus' crucifixion, Caesar ruled the known world. Rome was the unchallenged superpower. Its emperors worshipped as gods. Pilate thought he had the authority to release or crucify Jesus. But on the third day, the empire learned that it had no power at all. For while Caesar sat on his earthly throne, the true king had just broken the ultimate prison. Rome could kill, but it could not keep. Caesar could sentence, but he could not save. The resurrection declared that every earthly throne is temporary, and every empire built on pride will fall. There is one king, and he does not share his crown. But the shaking did not stop with politics. Sin itself was exposed, its power broken, its lies shattered. For centuries, sin ruled through guilt, shame, and condemnation. It enslaved hearts, bound minds, corrupted nations. It spoke with the voice of inevitability. You are fallen, you will die, you cannot escape. But when Jesus rose, he rendered sin powerless. He bore the curse, fulfilled the law, drained the cup of wrath, and then stood alive on the other side. The penalty was paid in full. The chains were broken. The resurrection did what no ritual, law, or effort could ever do. It set humanity free from the dominion of sin. And deeper still, the resurrection reached into the realm of spirits. Satan, the accuser, had played his hand. He had tempted, manipulated, stirred the crowds, entered Judas, and watched as the Messiah was crucified. He believed he had won, but in killing the lamb, he crowned the lion. In bruising the heel, his own head was crushed. The resurrection exposed the devil's greatest weapon, death, as now powerless. Christ did not rise secretly. He triumphed openly, making a public spectacle of the powers and principalities. The enemy who had ruled through fear was now rendered speechless. The accuser had no accusation left. The captor had no keys. The tyrant had no throne. The resurrection of Jesus is not an isolated event in religious history. It is the cosmic disruption that shook every power not rooted in truth. It declares that the kingdoms of this world are passing away, that sin no longer reigns, that Satan has lost his claim. It is the unseating of idols, the overthrow of empires, the uprooting of darkness. It is the dawn that no night can overcome. The shaking has begun, and nothing will ever be the same. The resurrection was not the end of the story. It was the beginning of a shockwave that continues to reverberate through time, space, history, and hearts. That empty tomb was not just a symbol of Christ's triumph. It was the epicenter of a seismic event that split time in two, shattered the power of death, and shook the foundations of everything that ever stood against God. And if he rose, truly rose, then everything changes, not just the world around you, but the world within you. You are the aftershock, because when he rose, he did not just conquer death for himself. He rewrote the destiny of everyone who would follow him. The grave was not only emptied of his body, it was emptied of its authority, and that authority, that tyrannical rule of sin, shame, despair, fear, and finality, it lost its grip on you. The resurrection was not a distant historical event. It is an invitation, a call, a summons. If the tomb could not hold him, then your past cannot hold you. Your chains cannot stay fastened. Your identity is no longer determined by what was done to you or even by what you've done, but by what he did when he walked out of that grave. You are not merely a spectator to the resurrection. If you belong to him, you are a participant in it. The same power that raised Jesus from the dead now lives in you, not metaphorically, not symbolically, but truly. This is not religion, this is revolution, a transformation from the inside out, a reversal of decay, a defiance of darkness. You are no longer bound to the patterns of this world because resurrection life is not an upgrade, it's a rebirth. Old things have passed away, behold, all things are made new. You are the evidence that death no longer gets the final word. Your life is not random, not accidental, not irrelevant. The ground shook when the stone rolled away, and that shaking hasn't stopped. Every step you take in his name, every word you speak in his truth, every act of love, mercy, courage, and righteousness is an echo of resurrection. You carry within you the shockwave of that morning. The darkness around you may tremble, but you do not, because the same Spirit who hovered over the deep in Genesis, who overshadowed Mary, who raised Jesus, is now dwelling in you. You are not just forgiven, you are remade. You are not just saved, you are sent. You are not just waiting for resurrection someday. You are living in the power of it today. You walk through a broken world as living proof that the grave lost its power. You stand as a defiant declaration against despair, fear, addiction, and death itself. When you speak hope, when you offer grace, when you choose holiness, when you love your enemy, when you worship in the valley, you send tremors into the kingdom of darkness. He rose, and because he rose, you rise. He lives, and because he lives, you live. You are not the aftermath of sin, you are the aftershock of resurrection. Asterisk, asterisk, conclusion of the speech, the radicalness of the resurrection. Asterisk, asterisk, so what does it all mean? It means the resurrection is not just a doctrine, it is a detonation. It shattered the finality of death, inverted the natural order, reversed the curse, dethroned the powers, and announced a kingdom that will never pass away. It was not a quiet morning in a garden, it was the thunderclap of eternity breaking into time. A dead man stood up, and the world has never recovered. This is not mythology, not metaphor, not religious poetry. This is reality more real than the ground beneath your feet. If he rose, then Caesar has no throne. Sin has no grip, Satan has no claim, the grave has no voice, and you, yes, you have no reason to stay in the shadows of who you used to be. The same Spirit that raised Jesus from the dead calls you, awakens you, empowers you, and sends you as a living echo of that world, shaking morning. We do not worship a memory, we follow a risen King. The tomb is empty and the throne is occupied. Everything has changed, and so must we. The stone has been rolled away, not to let him out, but to let you in. Step into resurrection. Become the aftershock.